If you're new to our channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.
Looking for the only Garden Talk radio show on your dial? You found it, the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Radio Show with your hosts Joey and Holly Baird.
Well, when it comes to planting flowers and having a beautiful landscape, sometimes you've got to prepare, and preparing in the fall for spring flowers is what we're going to talk about. We're talking about planting flowers in the fall, bulb planting. This is perennials, not annuals. Annuals are plants in which you plant in the spring, typically, and they grow, and then that's the end of their life cycle. Perennials are ones you plant once, and they continue to come back year after year to a certain degree.
Right. So you want to plant these in the fall. You can plant lilies in the spring.
Okay.
But all the rest of these are fall bulbs.
Okay. So what we want to do is we want to figure out, and we're going to focus, kind of be broad here because we have literally listeners in all growing zones. So you want to plant you want to identify the zone that you're in. Here in Milwaukee, we're in zone 5A, 5B. And each bulb or variety of bulbs are designated or grow for a specific growing zone.
Right. So unlike vegetables, sometimes you can get away with planting not exactly your zone. With these bulbs, you want to. So you don't want to grow zone 6 if you're in zone 5, or 4 if you're in zone 5. So that being said, you want to pay attention to that. If you do get the wrong bulbs, they may not come up, they may not survive. They're more sensitive.
So, and then if something's designed for 4, you might be able to get away with it growing in 5 because it's a little warmer. But we want to try to focus on the zone in which
the cold hours.
The cold hours, right?
Yeah. So when you plant these bulbs, you plant them with the top up, just like garlic. But if you're not sure, then just take your best guess.
And don't worry about it, because if you put it incorrectly, they will grow and come up out of the ground.
It'll figure it out. But, do your best guess. And you plant it basically 3 times the depth of whatever the size of the bulb is.
So if the bulb is 1 inch,
you're going to plant it 3 inches.
Right.
Now, sometimes pests will try to dig up the bulbs, like squirrels or maybe raccoons. I'm not even entirely sure, but typically the squirrels. So you can do a few things there. One, you can plant it closer to a freeze.
Right.
Or you can put chicken wire over the top.
Okay. And you can either, leave that chicken wire, it's called poultry netting, over the plants, and it will kind of grow in, the plants will grow in the ground, and everything will grow through it, and you actually leave it on the ground, and it will, just sit there and basically rust and rot away. So you can certainly do that when it comes to trying to prevent the animals from digging those plants up.
Right. So that's one thing. You want to make sure you're planting in loose soil. They're bulbs, so they're basically like a root, is what it is. So you want to have nice, loose, loamy soil. Densely packed soil is not good. It's not going to give them a chance to grow.
Right. So, you keep that in mind. And it just really depends on your discretion on what you feel. Obviously, if it's concrete type clay soil, not a good thing. If it's grass that was there and you've dug a hole there and it seems pretty okay, they'll be fine. They're going to do fine. And again, we want to plant them, you said, just before a freeze, to try to lock them in the ground to prevent the animals from digging them up, because that's really going to be your ultimate fight to get these things to grow, is animals coming and trying to eat them.
Right. And then when you plant them, you want to think about where the shade is. However, if it's something like a crocus, which is going to be first up in the spring, daffodils usually come up in April before the trees are filled in. You don't necessarily have to worry about that. But if it's something like a lily or an allium, you may have to worry. So you want to think about that, what you're planting, and what your shade situation is like when it's going to emerge.
Now, when we plant these bulbs, we want to try to, again, get in decent soil or fertile soil. And nature kind of takes care of itself. But if you're in really unpleasant soil, you want to try to find a better spot, or you will have to probably fertilize the second year with an all-natural fertilizer, because the nutrients in the bulb is what's going to keep that plant alive the first year and allow it to root and try to take what nutrients up it can. You might have to supplement and help it along the second year if you're in very, very poor soil. So if we can get fertile soil or decent soil or average soil, you're going to be far ahead of the game.
Now, the best and foolproof to plant are hyacinths. Hyacinths, I can't say that. Daffodils and alliums. So if you're like, this is my first year, blah, 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 that's what you want to go for. It'll give you some confidence. They'll grow. You'll be good. Daffodils are pretty indestructible. They kind of just continue to grow forever. You may have to divide them at some point because they might start to kind of spread a little bit. So definitely something to think about is if you like daffodils, you're good to go.
Lilies will last a long time. A lot of these other bulbs, we've talked to a couple of experts, because of the way the industry has worked and how they're and everything. 2 to 3 years is kind of what we're looking at.
And
the
that's
max.
especially for tulips. A lot of people like tulips, but we have to keep that in mind. The first year, just plant them. You plant them in your nice loose soil. The second year, you do have to fertilize them, and it doesn't hurt to fertilize them year after year, just to boost your soil and whatnot. But the first year, you don't have to worry about that.
So, with that being said, we want to look at how many do we get in a package. If you go to your garden center, you're going to get between 10 and 25 based on the manufacturer. It's kind of what we're looking at, and when we want to. Holding them, I've had questions about, I forgot to plant my bulbs, now it's January, what can I do? Well, can I put them in the freezer to mimic the cold hours and then plant them? Well, you can try to do that. It's really kind of a 50-50 shot whether or not they will do well, because that's why we have to plant them in the fall, because it's called cold hours in order to get the internal DNA, whatever you want to call, in the bulb to go through its cycle in order for it to grow correctly in the spring. We need it to have so many cold hours, and that also depends on your zone area and the type of bulb or flower in which you are trying to get developed and grow. Can you plant these in a container?
No, not ideally. So you need
not ideally. No. Some people can make it work successfully.
Yeah, you can try. I think if it was your first year planting bulbs, though, I would just go in the ground. Because
it's a plant and basically forget. In the container, you're going to have to remember to water, even though it's cold and it's winter and whatever the case is. And that container is elevated, which exposes it more to the air and actually affects the development of the bulb whenever spring comes. So we want to just put them in the ground. We can put these pretty much anywhere that we want to plant.
Now, you can use an auger, you can use a bulb planter, you can use a trowel, whatever. If you use an auger, like an auger driller, you want one that has what's called a slipping clutch.
Well, the drill.
The drill.
The drill has a slipping clutch.
So the drill, so that you're not drilling and all of a sudden this thing catches a root and then it spins around and breaks your wrist.
So a lot of, you have to look for these, if you're going to use a drill and place an auger, you can use an auger from Power Planter. They're a sponsor for next year. They've signed on. They have a variety of different sizes. If you're going to plant a lot, and what this slipping clutch on this drill is, you may have to ask specifically for it, because not all manufacturers create this on their drill. But it's whenever you catch something, instead of it going, it goes and it stops spinning and it pops it.
What's that noise?
Yeah, it keeps it stops the bit from spinning, and keeps just whatever it catches on, so it doesn't hurt your wrist or whatever.
And when we talk about lilies, we're talking about traditional lilies, not day lilies. Day lilies are a tuber. Regular lilies are a bulb.
Right.
That's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, the tubers, that's typically something you buy as a start.
If you plant these, in October or whatever, and you start to see them sprout out, that's okay. That's not a big deal. They'll do their thing. It'll be fine.
It's kind of like we experience with garlic. We plant it, try to get it 30 days in the ground before freeze, and if they do start coming up, it's not a big deal on that. They'll be fine. We don't want it with these flowers. We don't want to mulch them. We just want to plant them the normal depth in which is recommended, and leave them be. They'll be fine with that. If you keep it too warm, that's going to affect them, the development of them. So is there anything else that we have, the basic planting of flowers? when we talk about how long these things will bloom, it really depends on the conditions in which they're growing. If it's a really warm, hot couple of days, they're not going to last as long as if it's kind of a gloomy, dry, or gloomy, cool, not so hot. The time of bulb or the flower exposure varies based on the conditions. There's no set time frame.
In the spring, when they're done, you can trim them back.
Well, yeah, you can trim them back. A lot of times, many gardeners will just kind of leave them alone for a couple of weeks or a month to allow the green to absorb as much sunlight to redevelop and re-energize the bulb before it goes back into dormancy the next year. And with these flowers, it is a one and done. There's not going to be multiple blooms. It's going to be one bloom for a couple of days or maybe a week, and then that's it. So it's not one of these things like you'd see on a marigold, for example, where the flowers begin to die back. You dead ahead to encourage more growth or more flower development on that. So if you're going to look at planting some bulbs, getting some bulbs in the ground, now's the time. Go to your garden center. If you're here in the Milwaukee area, you can always check with Bloomel, see what they have available, and get them in the ground. And you can color coordinate these so they each come up at a different time, and the colors, kind of cascade across the flower bed. Thank you for checking out the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener radio show. For more, go to the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com for full-length in-studio video and podcast replay of Season 1. Season 2 underway and added weekly. Tweet us at TWVG Show or hashtag TWVG to be part of the program.